As we move through the semester, we're going to get more and more involved with trying to cover concepts so that we can build an actual application. This week, we're going to go through and do some validations within the context of a user profile, and I'm going to start building out a pet store application that I might revisit next week, put some additional concepts in as we look at some advanced features within our Swift controls that we can use for our different form elements, like maybe a nice menu or something like that. So some advanced features. And we're going to start taking a look at some of the other things that we can do. And in this case, instead of using Playground, we're actually going to use an iOS app. And when we get into creating an iOS app, it's going to look familiar to us, but there's going to be so many more things that we can do with an app as opposed to our app playground. So our app playground is a real simplified version of iOS. Anything that we put in there, we could essentially copy and paste the code from our app playground and put it within our iOS application, and it would just run. So, we can start out one place and move the code over. That's not a problem. But our app has so many different features that we just don't have the capability of utilizing within our app playground. And we're going to take a look at a couple of those different features as we build out our applications, such as how we can put in a light and dark theme, how we can go ahead and put in initial icons for our applications so that when we see it on the phone, when it starts up, it should show us a particular image. So we're going to take a look at how we can do some of those things as well. I'm going to go ahead and select app, not app playground, but app, hit next. Going to put in my pet store, hit next. Put it in my Scratch directory, that's fine. Gonna go ahead and create it. Now when we look at our actual file structure here, one of the things that we should note is that we have an assets folder, and we'll take a look at the assets momentarily. I just want to get the emulator up. We can see that there. I'm gonna go ahead and collapse this so we just have these things going on. And we're gonna start first by bringing in a couple assets from my downloads directory. So when we have images that we want to bring in, I can essentially just highlight them, drag them, and place them within my iOS. Unfortunately, it's going to ask me what file target is, and I can just go ahead and add them. I might want to go ahead and, if I can right click, do a new folder. Maybe I want to put all of my images in a resources folder just to keep things a little bit more organized, and I can drag them into that folder. Now, these are a couple different images. One is a ginormous dog and cat, and then the other one is a much smaller dog and cat without a background. If I look at the big one, this could be something that I use as an image that would show on the phone when I would run the emulator. I can go ahead and run my emulator, bring up my phone. This is going to be something that I'm not going to see within the preview panel. And when it flips over to the next screen, all of these have little icons that are associated to the applications. And when it gets to launching the My Pet Store app, look, it just has that white little version. Let's go back to the home, and we can see that there is no real image there, just a placeholder for My Pet Store at this point. That might be something that I want to address. That's what that big image would be for. So I can go through and close out of this. When I do that, if I have a tendency to just shut down the emulator, I need to go through and stop it. Once I stop it, all this stuff is going to go away. So stop it. Then, in order to get back to the code, this is where it has the folder view. So if I click on the little folder, it's going to show me the code view. So we don't get too lost in all of the windows and capabilities within here. We want to keep things a little bit where we can see them. Let's go ahead and focus on trying to get that updated before we start doing anything else. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the assets. When I do that, By default, I have accent color and I have app icon that is there. If I click on the app icon, we can see that I have a couple different things. Now, if I go ahead and I open that sidebar that's going to give us more information about the stuff that's in this window, one of the things that I can see is I can have the appearance for none. If I change that, it's just going to give me one option that I can use for a picture. If I want to do something where I have any dark and tinted, I can then go ahead and select an image for all different types of iOS. So when they have a light mode, it would show essentially any appearance. If they have dark mode selected, then it would show a different image. So I can do those kinds of things, but in my case, I'm just going to select none. And what I want to do is essentially drag in the dog and cat. Once I do that, it's pretty much set that for me. I can relaunch my application in my phone emulator. We can see the picture here that's popping up with my pet store. And then it's actually running the application. So it gives us that image and replaces that default placeholder image, and it makes our application look like it's more of a real application because we have something that's being deployed for the icon. I'm going to close down the emulator now and stop it, then click on the folder to get back in. So that's one thing that we can do. Now, if we go into our assets again, notice I have my images here, and I want to create a light and dark theme. And I'm going to use the colors within my image here in order to create the different primary and secondary colors. And I'm going to create my own colors and specify what they are. If I click in this area where I have my app icon and accent color, and I go ahead and say right click, new color set. It's going to bring in a color. It's going to put me in edit mode, PS, primary color. If I click on it again, I can pick what I want it to be. If I just want it to be one color, I can say none. If I want to be able to allow any or dark, and in the case of any or dark, it's going to be light or it's going to be dark. Or I can do any light and dark. I'm just going to do any and dark. So when it's light, it's going to have this image color, and when it's dark, it's going to have this image color. I'm going to start with the any appearance, and what I want to do here is I want to show the color panel. And this is going to allow me to be able to pick colors from the color wheel. I can also use the little eyedropper to pick colors from an image if I have an image to match. I'm not necessarily the most visually creative when it comes to creating an application. Typically in the past when I've been working, we've had professional design firms that have designed our web applications or whatever it is that we're doing for our applications. I can always make it look like something, but I just am not very creative in order to come up with colors and all this other kind of stuff. I usually leave that to somebody else. I also have the ability, if I want to use some type of a slider, I can do that. I can also pick from a standard palette of colors. I can then also use this type of spectrum, or just go to my pencil box and I can pick one of the pencils. I can also, if I decide that I don't want to use the color wheel or any of the other options in that dialog, and I actually use the color picker to do that, but I have values already set for my different options. And I'm going to go ahead and set the values here. And on the first one, this is going to be 0.968. The green is going to be 0.884, and the blue is going to be 0.848. When I do that, I'm going to get some light tan color, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on the dark, and in this case I'm going to make this 0.474, followed by the green is going to be 0.370, and then my blue is going to be 0.334. Lighter version for the light, and I have a dark brown for the darker version. I'm going to add another color set, and we'll take a look at how we can use these color sets in just a little bit. This is going to be PS secondary color. and it's essentially going to be the opposite. So on the light appearance for this, it's going to be what we just entered for the dark appearance. So this is 0.474, 0.370, and 0.334. Tab out of it, and it finally updates the color, and it's 0.968, 0.884, and 0.848. And we have our two different color sets that we are going to use. Another thing that we want to do while we're in our assets is we want to drag in and create an image so we can do a new image set. And in this case, I only want one of my images. I'm just going to use none and use the one time and drag in my cat and dog small, and that's going to allow me to use that image programmatically as well in a little bit easier manner. Now that I have all of my assets set up that I want to use, at least initially, of course, if you had more colors that you wanted to add, you could go through and add even more color sets. I'm going to just keep it pretty simple. When you are going through your assignment, you're going to have to add a couple different color sets and an image, but you're not going to have to necessarily go through and do the app icon. Now that we have that all taken care of, we can start thinking about what we need to do for our user profile. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to create pretty much data that is going to be for our application that can be shared through all the different views that we use. We kind of did this with our game, and we're going to do this for our user profile as well. So we're going to do our user data, and once we get that done, then we're going to pretty much wrap for this video, and we'll continue with our development in the next video. I'm going to go ahead and add a new file from template. And this is where I can select different types of files. And I'm going to take a Swift file, hit next, and then I can go ahead and name this. In this case, I'm going to call this user data and create. Now when I bring it in, it has this nice little comment. It's importing Foundation, but we're going to change that out with Swift UI. Within our class that we define, so this is user data, we're going to make this an observable object because we want to be able to pass it through all of our different views as an environment object and access it. So we want to create that observable object, and we are going to create a user profile within this, and we want to go ahead and set up a user profile class as well in order to do this. And I want to add another file, and I want to go ahead and new file from template because I like that little comment block it was adding, and I can just go ahead and say Swift file next. This is going to be user profile. And again, I want to change this out to Swift UI, and this is going to be a user profile. We want to make this identifiable, meaning that it has some type of identity. We're going to give it an ID, and this is going to be UUID. We're going to create it with a first name of type string, a last name of type string, a password of type string, a phone of type string, and an email of type string. We want to create an initializer, and I'm just going to go ahead and accept this, and it's going to bring in my initializer for me and initialize each of the fields. And then I want to go ahead and do a function in here that's going to be a toString. So this is toString, except no arguments, and it's going to return a tuple of string, 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 and one more string. And within here, we're going to return, if I can spell return right, the first name, the last name, password, phone, and email. Now that we have that all coded, I can go back to my user data and finish this, and then we'll be done with this video. So we're just going to add a published property of user profile. And this is going to be equal to user profile, and we're basically going to bring in, I'm gonna accept this, but we're not going to be passing in our UUID. We're just going to be passing in everything else, and this is going to be an empty string here, because initially we want them to provide some information, and we're going to set this all to empty. Because at some point we want to create a login dialog to get some of that information. And when we go back to our profile, one of the things that we want to do is on our user profile, we actually want to make this a UUID and not have the ID passed in. So if we make that correction, then everything will be okay, because we're just going to have it initialize and create an instance of a unique user ID and then assign it to the self ID, and then we're not going to need them to pass in that unique user ID for that ID. Then if we come back here, this should resolve itself, and we've created enough for the first pass, and we'll continue on in the next video.